Hi, I'm Sarah from Mostly Books, and here are some of my recommendations for this Christmas. Starting off with the little people in your life, we love in the shop Isadora Moon and Claude the French dog. Both of these are aimed at about 5-6-year-olds. When the children are moving from picture books onto chapter books, still looking for a lot of illustrations. Both of them have full colour illustrations throughout, but just want a little bit more of a kind of grown-up reading experience. Isadora is part fairy and part vampire, and in this particular book, Isadora is due to be the bridesmaid at her aunt's wedding. However, as tends to be the case with Isadora, things don't go quite according to plan. At Claude at the Palace, Claude is due to babysit the royal children, he rescues the Queen, and he makes sure that the royal birthday party goes without a hitch. They're both fantastic, really funny, gifty hardbacks, $8.99 each. My next recommendation is a crime thriller. Who doesn't love a crime thriller? This particular one is called 50/50 by Steve Kavanagh. Steve's books are brilliantly written, incredibly fast-paced, and real page-turners. In this particular one, there are two sisters, both of whom phone the emergency services within minutes of each other, and both of whom report the murder of their dad. And both sisters accuse their other sister of murdering the father. So this book follows the trial, and you see it from both perspectives. And there's plenty of twists and turns, and there's a fantastic twist at the end. If you know somebody who likes a bit of crime and grit in their life, 50/50 is a perfect choice at $8.99. My next recommendation is a gorgeous little gifty hardback for £10. It's called Philosophy, and it's by Elizabeth Day. If you don't know Elizabeth, she's responsible for the podcast How to Fail with Elizabeth Day. That podcast introduces guests, and they talk about 3 failures that they've experienced in their life and how it's had an impact on them. Over the course of the last few years, where Elizabeth's been filming that podcast, she's come to the conclusion that those failures fall into 7 core categories. She calls them the 7 principles of failure. And this little book covers those principles and also gives you little insights into some of her episodes. It's a really lovely little gifty book you can dip in and out of, or you can sit and read in a single sitting. This is £10. My next recommendation is the perfect book for the person who you don't know what to buy for. So this is called Funny You Should Ask, and it's created by the QI Elves, so the team behind QI and the podcast There's No Such Thing as a Fish. The QI Elves have also been regular guests on the Zoe Ball breakfast show recently, and that's where this book stems from. This book is the collection of their favourite ponderings or questions that have been raised by the guests of the breakfast show. They include things such as, how much water would it take to put the sun out? Can you actually close the black hole? And why are dad jokes just so awful? Perfect present, but also really fun to have just lying around on Christmas Day to pick up and browse. It's $12.99. My last choice today is probably my favourite of the bunch. It's a fiction title called The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. If you're not familiar with Matt, he has had a very public battle with depression and mental illness, which he brings into his non-fiction writing, but he also manages to intertwine it into his fiction in a very clever way. In this particular book, you meet a young girl who's basically come to the conclusion that her life isn't worth living. She's very lonely. She feels like she doesn't have any positive impact on anybody. So she takes some pills and goes to sleep. She wakes up in a place called the Midnight Library. And the Midnight Library, it turns out, has got miles and miles and miles of shelves, and every single book on every shelf represents what her life could have been like if she'd made a different decision. So what ends up happening is she ends up going back and living some of the lives that she could have lived had she chosen a different path. It's so well written, you don't really see what's coming, and it really does make you think about the emotion that some people feel when they're feeling lonely or don't feel like things are quite going their way. I highly recommend it. It's a $16.99 hardback. I really hope that you like our selection and there's something there for you. Thanks very much, and happy Christmas from the team at Mostly Books.